by giving away the item, we don't give away the memory. We don't, and I think allowing people to remember that. And sometimes it's just, in the daily, you're busy. So you don't even have time to think and reflect, we're just going.
That's true.
So
I feel like it's interesting, like you make people a little bit uncomfortable for a moment. And I think it is in that discomfort that we find the growth and the opportunity
Totally.
to almost restructure the thought process and
reframe.
A lot of times people are holding on to things that might be invading their peace. Welcome to the world of Why Wait Till Friday, a place where we keep it simple, intentionally find joy in the middle moments, and consistently stay comfortable. Enjoy today's courageous conversation. Welcome to the Why Wait Till Friday podcast. We're back here in 2025. And so I thought it would be super appropriate to bring Christine on board with us today, being that it is a new year. And a lot of times when we start a new year, we want to revamp. We have things that we want to clear. We want to find, I think, a level of clarity. And Christine is an expert here locally in Miami on organization. And so what I think connects us, Christine, and what I think I want us to kind of bring to life today is the power of how clutter in general can be overbearing and can be almost paralyzing, whether it's internal mental clutter or external stuff.
Totally.
And so I want you to kind of talk a little bit about your company, a little bit about what you do, and then we're going to connect it and we're going to talk on how these things are relative and important.
Cool. So this is my second career. My first career I was a physical therapist for 15 years. And that was great. But I got to a point where I needed better work-life balance with my kids and life and all the things. So I dug deep and felt like this was just a natural part of who I am. Who I am is someone that really likes to help others. And so I think by helping others kind of feel better in their spaces, I'm absolutely making the impact that I kind of dreamed to do as a PT, but on a very personal level. And I find that sometimes it's even more impactful than the work I used to do. So it's been great.
That's so interesting. Christina is very aesthetic, as you can tell. But what I love about her is that it isn't only externally. She's aesthetic internally. She's super deep, super authentic and honest. And I think that that's what attracts me to you. And it shows in your work and in the path that you lead. I think you take a very personal approach to your clients, and it's felt and it's seen all the time. You've done it for me, and I've seen you do it for many. You said something that I thought was interesting, and I think that that's where we're going to kind of start today, if it's okay with you. You said you wanted work-life balance, and that what you do for the clients that you see today is even more personal than what you used to. So I want to talk a little bit about both, about how you found work-life balance.
Yes.
And tell us about your beautiful family, and then kind of how the work you do now feels personal and how you're able to really connect with humans.
Yeah. So I think better work-life balance was first self-reflection. I think you have to kind of be aware, and my kids helped me kind of point that out. My little one, well, actually my older one just said that she's like, "Mommy, you're not super happy," in not so many words, but that kind of was a bit of a gut punch for me, and a place where I felt like I was a mom showing my girls hey, work and do your thing. And so I definitely, that was a point where I knew I needed to make changes. And sorry, what was
the other thing? And what I'm going to say is that's courageous of you to be able to kind of understand that maybe there needs to be change, and change is scary, right? And
Super.
When people call you or people call me, they're probably looking for change, and we're walking them through to find that. Okay. With that came my next question, which is, you said that when you connect with people now, it's even more personal, and you feel really like you're going deep with them, right? Can you kind of share how that happens?
Yeah,
You're working externally, right? Because you're
totally.
Christine goes in and she revamps spaces for people and organizes, and she could tell you much better than I can, but she literally creates magic, right? So what I try to do internally with human beings through Why Wait Till Friday, she's doing externally. And so how do you get personal when you're talking about the external?
Yeah, so I always say like we're organizing from the outside in, and the aesthetic, of course, it's important, but I think the real work that's being done on the inside and that like that part that is visceral where the people just feel like, wow. I mean, I've had clients bawling in tears, and I think it speaks to the fact that our environments can be very heavy on us and like just weigh us down. You could kind of have, like you've talked about a lot, like that negative internal dialogue of just like, my house is a mess, or maybe you want to be that person that entertains more, but you just never think that your home is ready to welcome visitors. And so I try to hear people out. I'm very like, it's not a one size fits all recipe. So I want to hear like, hey, what are your pain points? Like if we're doing your kitchen, like talk me through one of your days. And if the client's like, oh my God, the kids come home from school and we have all of this like excess, artwork or whatever. And then I have mail and then I have to cook dinner. I try to create systems in the kitchen that are going to solve for those problems. So maybe it's a drawer that holds their artwork in the kitchen. Like you might always think like, hey, a kitchen holding artwork, that doesn't really, make sense, but it makes sense if it makes sense for that family. And so I think that's where people, and then I'll get text messages, the next day where it's like, oh my God, like making my coffee this morning was magical. And I think it also is really integrating that like love yourself thing and like presenting yourself with like a coffee bar that feels a little more like special, than just some Folgers out of a can. Like decant it and kind of make yourself feel like you're in a hotel and you're serving yourself in a way that's a little more elevated in the everyday. And I think that's where people start to feel like, wow, like I don't need to experience, a boutique for like that shopping experience. I can shop out of my closet if I, place a book, add a little, greenery in my closet and kind of hone things in a way that feels good. There's less. So yeah, I think that's kind of where the magic happens.
It feels like magic. She's talking about it. I'm like, where do we start in my home, right? But you said something about the hotels. And so Why Wait Till Friday encourages people to bring a little bit of hotel into their everyday life. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we wait for vacation. We wait for the very specific moment to find a place of like peace or to find that magic of feeling like everything's in its place or where it's done for you, right? But like, what about if we took a more proactive stance on making our home a place that we're proud to come to, a place where we feel at peace, a place where we feel hotelish, right?
Totally.
We spend all year planning a vacation, right? But then what about everything in between? Like people are very typical to go on vacation in December, but now we're in January, right? And a lot of times this is not the space for vacation, but what about if what we feel on vacation, we can feel a little bit when we're at home if we create the energy and the space within our own environment, right? Like if there's chaos and clutter and disorganization or whatever it may be, right? Like for some people, it doesn't necessarily have to be that everything is super organized, but that everything has its place, right? And that's something you said, you personalize it, but like what's missing so that your home is magical? Right?
Yeah.
And so I think that when you do that and when you give people the right to author that and to tell you, you know what, in my home, if I had this like this and this like this, I think I could feel the magic. And then that you can come in and help them attain that is so Why Wait Till Friday is, right? Because it's what allows people to bring the sense of vacation, to bring the sense of hotel into their space on the daily in the practical way, right? So that they're proud of that home and that they can feel a sense of peace when they're there.
Yeah, and it's really not for the show or like it's not for the Pinterest perfect photo. It's really so that you can experience that beauty. And I think, I mean, my clients would probably attest, I can be a little harsh in terms of eliminating and really like the declutter is kind of part of my favorite part of the project, even though obviously the styling and making it aesthetically pleasing is a second. But less is where the difference really is. It's in less numbers, less for us to manage.
Do you get resistance from clients about getting rid of things?
I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the space that we're doing. But I think, and some people, it's on a continuum, right? Of like someone that is very sentimental and has a very hard time, holds on very tightly, to someone who, a very common word that's used today is, a minimalist, someone who just is not as, doesn't hold on to things kind of as tightly. And so I want to honor that person and where they are at, but kind of ask them deep questions and allow them to self-reflect. And usually the client answers, they're like, yeah, I don't know why I'm holding on to this. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, let it go. And so I think the skill is in asking them the right questions so that they can be introspective. And, they're always very, very thankful for, kind of pushing them a little bit to their limits and begging the question for like, yeah, why am I holding on to this, and kind of offering up other ways to hold on to the memory that isn't necessarily holding on to the item. So you can take a picture, you can do other things to where you're recognizing the place for that item and that it lives in your heart. By giving away the item, we don't give away the memory. We don't, and I think allowing people to remember that. And sometimes it's just, in the daily, you're busy. So you don't even have time to think and reflect, we're just going.
That's true.
So
I feel like it's interesting, like you make people a little bit uncomfortable for a moment. And I think it is in that discomfort that we find the growth and the opportunity
Totally.
to almost like restructure the thought process and like
Reframe.
A lot of times people are holding on to things that might be invading their peace without realizing that it's invading their peace. And that happens from an emotional place too, right? Like one of the activities that I did with my family and on a vacation that we took over the break is like, we not only talk about like the word of the year, but we also talk about what we want to leave behind, right? In my case, like I wanted to leave impulse behind because I can tend to be impulsive. And I realized that impulsivity can kind of like break my pattern and break my peace, ultimately where I want to go. And so it's like what you said, it's really uncomfortable sometimes to leave where we think our security is, because some of my impulsivity can be seen positive as spontaneity. But for me, it can be debilitating as a human in my professional work, in my home, right? And so same thing with a client. For you is, if you have a home that's cluttered, that's filled with stuff, but that stuff is your safety, and somebody comes in and says, hey, for us to be able to achieve the goal that you have, that you verbalize, that you have to declutter,
Right.
we're going to have to start to pick how we can remove things. And I think you made such a great point by saying that what you're getting rid of is just tangent, but what you're keeping is always with you, right? And it's the same thing, like when you have a message of mindset and when we're asking people to leave something behind that they may have interpreted as safe, it's not necessarily that you're getting rid, it's that you're placing it where it belongs.
Totally.
Right? And so we don't have to eliminate the other chapters of our life. You're not necessarily eliminating a memory. You're just revamping how you store it so it's not occupying space that's kind of like intruding in a level of peace.
And leaving you with work, because really every object in our home requires maintenance. It requires us to have to touch it, to dust it, to, and so I always just say, like, the less you have, the less you need to respond to. And if, I think on the regular, we can all feel overwhelmed, like life between a group chat, between all of the hats that we wear in this life. I just think, why spend it on managing items that really, like, when you pull things back, it's not that important, and reminding yourself, like, you come with nothing, you leave with nothing. None of us are guaranteed tomorrow, and I think that's where I bring in my personal experience of losing my dad at a very young age. And probably that's why for me, it's a little bit easier to part with things, because I had a personal experience where it's like, that the thing doesn't matter.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And you, like I said, it's like speaking to your clients and letting them know, like, you actually are still honoring the memory without necessarily having to invade the peace with the stuff.
Correct.
Right.
Or sometimes it's like a gift, and they're like, oh my God, I feel so bad though. My mother-in-law gave it to me, or my best friend. And it's like, I'm sure you were grateful in that moment. And by giving it away, it doesn't mean that you aren't still grateful for it. But if that item isn't serving you for a reason and you're not using it, it's taking up space and holding you back.
I almost want to play like the song "Let It Go."
No,
Like, let it go.
exactly.
Right? In every aspect. And you said something, because I feel like, and I've always honored Christine for her style, for her like home is very aesthetically, it's welcoming, and that's something about your
Sweet.
home that I've observed, and I copy it, and I say that with the most frank space, and I'm serious when I say this. I remember when I was remodeling my home and going through like the craziness of this place, and I had gone to yours. Even though everything is in its place, it's not a museum.
Yeah.
There's a lot of emotion that I feel when I walk in. It's very welcoming. It's very
Thank you.
you feel like you want to like sit and chill. And I wanted to create that same vibe in my home that we're sitting in, right? It's almost like, yes, everything has its place, and it's organized, but the reality is that I want it to feel like a place where you can sit and feel like you're on vacation.
You did it.
Thank you. And so when people come and they're like, man, it's so nice to be here. Like, it feels like the light and I'm always like, as long as the vibe is
That's all it
good.
is.
And a lot of that vibe comes from like a proactive approach to keeping it. And that's going to lead me to my next thing here. But I wanted to kind of ask you something, because speaking of her aesthetics, right? You said like, we're not organizing a home for a Pinterest post, right? And in our world, because we're both entrepreneurs and have to be on socials and are kind of like vulnerable to the world, how do we keep our internals as priority, right? How do you keep your clients as understanding you're doing this for yourself? How do I let people know like you're working your inside for you? It's not for the world. How do I continue to check in with myself and know like, yes, I have a brand, and yes, we have a movement, but the reality is that my work is mine internally.
Yeah.
So how do you make sure your clients are knowing like you're not making a home for others, you're making your home for yourself,
So I think the biggest piece of that is I involve my client in the process, and it might be seen as a little bit of work. I mean, they're scheduled the day that I come in too, and it's not so that they can, help. It's really, they're a vital piece. And without them telling me like, no, we don't do cereal, or I have a little one that we don't like snacks on the first level because they'll eat them all. And then a different family might say, oh no, we need snacks down low because I can't be getting them every time they need something. So it's integrating those critical pieces that without the client's involvement, like I can't build a system that makes sense for them. And I'm not just copying and pasting, just bins that work in the space that worked for my family. They may not work for yours. They won't work for yours because everyone's so different. So it's really hearing them out. And as we kind of go through the declutter, I'm getting like bits and pieces that are starting to paint the picture for me. Or when I build it back, what am I going to insert? What's important? And they don't realize, but I'm listening the whole time to the little things, because I really do believe that it's in the little things.
Right.
Like it really is.
Little moments, for sure, right? In the in-between.
Absolutely.
Of things. And I think that the main thing I get from that is that you allow your clients to narrate the process.
Definitely.
Right? And at Why Wait Till Friday, we're constantly encouraging humans to narrate their story, right? And not do it for what your neighbor might think or what you think the world will think. It's do it because it's what's important to you. I know I mentioned that I had a lot of construction here, and I lived a very difficult construction process in my home. And I remember before the construction, I had a lot of stuff in my house. And I remember always feeling like heavy when I was home, right? Like feeling like I just had too much, and I was just like a being in a space that wasn't mine. I can't explain it. It's almost like there was just so much stored years. And when I finally decluttered and construction, it's been like one thing that I have understood is that in clutter, there's a lot of chaos. And when you have internal clutter and you don't compartmentalize, right? And you don't start to like kind of find the pieces of your internal place to quiet down the chaos, it can become very, very heavy. And I think the same thing happens with the space, right? When your space is very, very cluttered, it feels overwhelming. It feels like, where do I even begin? So with you taking that proactive approach and encouraging people before it gets too much, before the clutter is so like overwhelming, take the first step, do the thing, right? Like take something
Totally.
buy the bin, create the space, right? So that you're compartmentalizing and getting almost like ownership and control
Of your chaos.
right?
Yeah.
Of your chaos, right? Because I mean, it's still chaotic, right? Life, I feel life is always chaotic, and but if internally we feel a little bit of control over our chaos, it's so much more bearable.
Totally.
And then we can really be present and enjoy what's happening, enjoy your home, feel proud, right? You want to feel proud of who you are, what you are in the environment that you live in, whether, it's a tiny efficiency or a, multi-million, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Don't look to the others to see how they have or what they have. Like you said, it's not for Pinterest. You can have a tiny little space that belongs to you. You honor it. You can live in it and be proud of it, right? So, my kind of last thing that I want to ask you is, how do you encourage the clients that you have and that you've worked with, and I know you've worked with many, to continue what you do? Right? Because you're in there, you're coaching them, you're helping them. You go out, she like builds her car with these beautiful bins and organizes for them. But like, how do you encourage them to keep that going?
So I think it's in the dialogue throughout the process, and then making sure that the systems work for them so that the daily maintenance is there, right? Like I always say, I'm not a magician, and doing the work and coming to your house once, there's a ton of maintenance that is required for upkeep. So if you don't see yourself refilling a jar, don't buy the jar, because if the decanting process, like now you have to fill it. So I think building systems that work for the client, for me, all of my baskets aren't micro-organized inside. Like for me, sometimes it's just a label and toss the shoes in, and that's where the shoes go. So having an easy system that's manageable is what works, and that's what I like to do for my clients, is make sure that the system is a manageable one for them, or if they have help at home, that it's a manageable system for those that are assisting them. And then also I talk about, like, I do an evening reset and a morning routine. So at night, I put a load of laundry in, I make sure the dishes are done. If there's any like mail or anything on the counter, I'm taking care of that, because I like starting from like a clean slate in the morning. It's super important for me to not feel cluttered, right? Like you never know what that day is going to bring. So having kind of a clean slate in the morning allows me to like breathe and start and be ready for anything that comes my way. And I think that also is super important. Like the more that your house is manageable, life can be super chaotic. And so for me, I know, and going back to when I was younger, like when my father was sick, life seemed so chaotic and so scary. And so I think my OCD, or whatever you want to name it, really kicked in, and it allowed me to feel like I had a sense of control during a time that life felt very out of control. And I've carried that with me throughout the years, and I just feel like I'm a bit more resilient, it's a little bit easier to go through struggles that, life's always gonna throw at you, if your home base, A, is a sanctuary that can energize you, and then B, it's a manageable one that you don't feel like you're literally drowning in things. And it's really doing a little bit each day.
I have to kind of like take a deep breath, because I was thinking so many of the same things you just said, but more from like an emotional place. I feel like that's why we're so aligned in as personal humans, but also like in our businesses. Because you said about control, right? And you said about like how you start your day, and you said about like it's like the little proactive steps. So, I feel like Christine, in her own way, teaches her clients to be intentional, to stay consistent, but keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
And that's exactly like why wait till Friday, right? I want humans to recognize how much control they can actually have on their internal self if we take a simplistic, intentional, and consistent approach to it, right? We don't want to wait for the hardest day to pull out a journal and start writing, right? I want everyone to wake up in the morning and start their day with a small, tiny reflection, so that they're owning their story, right? So that they're going through the process knowing that they have a lot of control of what's happening within We don't have control of the external, just like what you said. You can control your home, your sanctuary, your little place, right? Whereas we can't control what's going to happen on the outside. We can't control what's going to happen in our day. But we could take steps daily in a simplistic, intentional, and consistent format to find that joy, to come into your house and feel like, this is my place. Because so many clients, so many times sit outside and dread stepping into their space, dread stepping into their home for so many reasons. And this is one way to start to grasp that, to be like, I'm excited. A lot of times, even now, especially because I went through like the chaos of construction and, obviously I honor and I try to be very present in my life. And I'll get here, especially with my little one who's in my car all the time with Lucas, and I'll say, Papi, we're getting to our casa. And I literally say this to him and I'm like, how amazing does it feel to get to a casa we love? Like, not to take it for granted, not to feel like, oh, like we work for this. We own this, and this is our home and this is our place, and we need to honor it when we walk in. And I think that there's internal work to be done with that, but there's an external opportunity with your company, which you're gonna tell us the name in a minute. It's adorable on her very aesthetic sweater, by the way, and I'm super aesthetic too in my sweater. But reality is that it's an ability for your clients to also have control of the space that should be their sanctuary, right? A lot of times we focus so much on our professional space, on the kids' activities. We show up for everyone else. But what happens to showing up not only for ourselves, but for our nucleus, our home, what I call our circle, right? So I think that that's so connected in what you said, right? Is that level of control.
Yeah, and I think like one last thing is, for those that aren't my clients and for those listening and who care, I'm someone that's actionable. And so I want to leave you with something where it's like, just pick one item and to declutter a day. And you have 365 days in the year. So after 365 days, that's a lot of items. Maybe it's a pencil that, lost its eraser day one, and that seems so insignificant. But when you collect those ripples over 365 days, you're going to get somewhere. And I also, like we were talking a little bit earlier, you can find yourself in a state of like analysis paralysis where you're just like, oh, if I can't organize my whole home, like, forget it. And it's like, no, like, do little chunks at a time and bite-sized chunks. When you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, like I've gotten there. So maybe you want to start with 365 items, or you say, hey, this month I'm going to really focus on my kitchen. And I also say, don't go out and buy the bins. Do the harder work, which is looking at what items aren't serving me. Do the declutter first. Set up your systems first. And maybe it's with an older basket that isn't the prettiest, but see if that system works for you before investing more money. Because people can, be very quick, because the more exciting part of the work is the purchasing, right? That feels good. So it's easier to do that, but I would say flip it and actually do the work, do the declutter, try some systems without buying anything, and then treat yourself. If you're kind of doing a good job and checking things off, then maybe buy the pretty bin.
I love it. The key word there was action. You guys know I'm all about word, right? And that's it, right? So anything we do, any way that we act towards a place of goodness. So if the home is cluttered and decluttering is the goal, one act a day. That's it. If internally we feel heavy, if internally we don't know where our joy sits, an act a day to find and feel the joy is all it takes. I say, if you're journaling, it could be one line a day, one item that you're writing about, one moment that you're writing about, one tiny middle moment in the in-between. Same thing, right? So I think we're going to kind of close it out today with the encouragement of saying, like, act towards your joy, act towards making your home and your place what you want it to be, a tiny bit each day. And when you're ready to live the movement or declutter your home, call us.